She accused me of flirting with her husband. But the truth hit back. The night was supposed to be mine. After years of sleepless nights, internships no one paid me for, and professors who seemed determined to break me down, I had finally graduated from business school. My parents rented out a small but elegant banquet hall, strung fairy lights over the tables, and invited everyone who mattered. Family friends, co-workers who had watched me crawl toward this finish line. For once, I wasn't standing in anyone's shadow. At least that's what I thought. I remember the clinking of glasses, the warm chatter, the sound of someone laughing a little too loudly at the open bar. I had just sat down with my friends when Gina, my older sister, stood up, glass raised, demanding everyone's attention. It caught me off guard. Gina has always loved the spotlight, but part of me stupidly believed she might surprise me just this once. Maybe she'd say something kind, acknowledge the work I'd put in, the blood and sweat that nobody else saw. Instead, her smile curled into something venomous. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, "to my little sister, who, while I was 6 months pregnant, decided it would be a good idea to hit on my husband." The words dropped like stones into the room. Laughter died mid-breath. The clinking stopped. My heart slammed against my ribs, my mind screaming, "Did she just—" I scanned the faces around me. My mother froze, her polite smile plastered on like a mask. My father's hand tightened around his glass until the veins in his knuckles stood out. My friends shifted uncomfortably, some glaring at Gina, others darting looks at me as if to confirm it wasn't true. And Michael, her husband, sat stunned, staring at Gina like she'd grown horns. I wanted to speak to defend myself, but my throat locked. Years of being told to let it go and don't cause drama had conditioned me to silence. But in that silence, my blood boiled. Ask yourself, if your own sister called you a homewrecker in front of your entire family, would you have stayed quiet? Or would something inside you start to snap because I could feel the fracture forming? To understand why Gina's words hit me like a blade, you'd have to know the history. My sister has always been the son in our family, loud, fiery, impossible to ignore. And I was the one expected to orbit quietly around her, never casting a shadow. From birthday parties to family reunions, Gina had a way of turning the spotlight onto herself. If I sang a song at Christmas, she'd suddenly announce an engagement. If I got a scholarship, she'd interrupt with surprise news about a promotion. And if I dared to show frustration, my parents would whisper the same tired line, "Don't make a scene, keep the peace." She doesn't mean it, but she did mean it, every single time. By the time we were adults, I had become an expert at swallowing anger whole. At ignoring the twisting in my stomach when Gina's arm linked through Dad's at a party while she bragged about herself cutting me off mid-sentence. At forcing a smile when she leaned in and hissed, "You'll never be more than background noise." And my parents? God, they were terrified of appearances. Our family motto, unspoken but suffocating, was simple: no drama in public. It didn't matter if Gina humiliated me in private or chipped away at my self-worth day by day. What mattered was that outsiders saw us as one happy, polished unit. So I learned to fold myself smaller. I learned to stay quiet even when my chest burned with words. But the problem with silence is that it doesn't erase the wound. It just buries it, waiting for the day it explodes. And as I stood at my graduation party, Gina smirking at me with that glass of champagne raised high, I realized this was the moment. Years of suppressed anger pressed against my ribcage like a dam about to break. Ask yourself, how long could you let someone else write your story before you ripped the pen from their hand? Gina wasn't finished. She set her glass down, savoring the silence like a stage actor waiting for the audience to lean forward. Then with deliberate cruelty, she added, "And don't think I don't have proof. A few months ago, my husband told me you were messaging him while I was carrying his child." Shameless, isn't it? Gasps circled the room. My aunt's hand shot up to her mouth. A few cousins exchanged wide-eyed looks, already whispering. My mother's lips tightened as if she wanted to vanish into her wine glass. I could barely breathe, proof she was talking about a single direct message I had sent Michael. A short professional inquiry about his work. He's a financial consultant, and I'd wanted his opinion on a career path. That was it. No emojis, no flirting, nothing suggestive. Just a couple of dry two-line exchanges that ended with "thanks, appreciate it." But in Gina's mouth, it became poison. She spoke of it like some sordid late-night secret painting, me as a vulture circling her marriage. Michael looked stricken, shaking his head slightly, but Gina's words drowned him out. Inside, I screamed, "Say something! Tell them the truth!" But the years of conditioning pressed down on me again. Don't cause drama. Don't make a scene. My silence was exactly what Gina wanted. It made me look guilty. I watched as relatives shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, unsure who to believe. And the shame that pooled in my chest was worse than rage. Because in that moment, it wasn't just Gina's lie. It was the weight of every time I'd been forced to swallow her poison before. Every moment of being told to play along for the sake of family. And I knew I couldn't stay silent much longer. The air was suffocating, thick with whispers and judgment. My pulse thundered in my ears. I was bracing myself to finally speak when Michael stood up. Enough, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like glass breaking. Every eye turned to him. Gina froze, her smirk faltering. Michael looked around slowly, then at me. "She did message me." "Yes, but it was about work." It was short, polite, and nothing more. "If you're all waiting for some scandal, you're going to be disappointed." A few relatives exhaled in relief. But before Gina could recover, Michael's expression hardened. He placed his glass down carefully, as if steadying himself for the blow. "And since Gina has chosen tonight to attack her sister's character, I think it's only fair I share the truth about hers. The room stilled. You could almost hear the collective inhale. Michael took a breath. 2 weeks ago, I got the results of a paternity test. The child Gina just gave birth to, he's not mine. The words detonated like a bomb. Chairs scraped. Someone actually shouted what my father swore under his breath. Gina's face drained of color. Michael, don't. But he didn't stop. I had my suspicions after a work party. The way she acted with a coworker, too familiar. So I checked her phone. Text confirmed it. Flirtatious, incriminating, undeniable. I held my tongue until after this party because I didn't want to ruin her sister's moment. But since Gina decided to drag someone else through the mud tonight, let the truth be clear. The silence that followed wasn't just shock, it was betrayal echoing across every wall. Gina's composure cracked. She stumbled forward, shrieking at him, denying deflecting, but her words were drowned out by the weight of Michael's revelation. And me, I just stood there numb, the anger and humiliation, mixing with something else, dark satisfaction. Because for once, the spotlight had shifted, and Gina couldn't twist her way out of it. The room buzzed with shocked voices overlapping, but all I could hear was Gina's shrill scream. She clawed at Michael's arm, shouting, "You liar! You set me up!" Her mascara streaked down her cheeks as her words tangled into a mess of denials and curses. Something inside me broke. Years of watching her steal every spotlight, years of swallowing my anger to keep the peace. Years of being branded the lesser sister, they all surged to the surface. My hands shook not from fear, but from fury, so sharp it blurred my vision. I walked toward her, each step heavy, deliberate. My friends tried to pull me back, whispering, "Don't just let it go." But I couldn't. Not this time. When I reached her, I grabbed her arm. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me? You ruined my graduation. You dragged my name through the mud in front of everyone. And for what? To cover your own lies." Her eyes flickered defiance. Fear, then back to defiance. "This is still Mom and Dad's party. You don't get to throw me out." Something snapped. My hand moved before my mind caught up. The slap echoed louder than any of her screams. Her glasses flew off, clattering against the floor. Gasps filled the hall. Someone shouted my name, but I didn't stop. I kept yelling, kept pushing, years of venom pouring out at once. "You're nothing but a parasite, an attention-hungry fraud who can't stand anyone else being happy for even one damn day." It wasn't graceful. It wasn't dignified. It was raw, ugly, and real. Finally, two of my friends pulled me back, dragging me toward the far end of the room. My chest heaved, tears stung my eyes, and I realized I wasn't shaking from anger anymore. I was shaking from release. Ask yourself, if you'd been humiliated your whole life by someone you could never escape, would you have held back? Or would you have snapped like I did? Because in that moment, I wasn't the calm, reasonable daughter. I was a volcano that had been forced to simmer for too long, and the eruption was inevitable. The silence that followed was heavier than any slap. The music had stopped. Plates clinked as people set them down, mid-bite whispers spreading like cracks in glass. My parents rushed forward, their faces flushed, not with concern for me, but with embarrassment. My mom's voice trembled, half hissed, half pleading. "How could you? At your own graduation in front of everyone, Dad wasn't any gentler." He grabbed my arm as if I were a misbehaving child. "You humiliated us tonight. Do you realize what people will say?" Humiliated them, not me. Not a single word about Gina detonating a lie that could have destroyed my reputation forever. Not about Michael exposing a betrayal that shattered the family's image. Their only concern was optics, what the neighbors, the aunts, the family friends would whisper tomorrow. In the corner, Gina was crumpled on the floor, sobbing, not from guilt, but from the sting of being caught. Michael stood apart, jaw tight, refusing to even look at her. And the guests. They hovered awkwardly, waiting for cues. Do they console me, condemn me, pretend this never happened? My friends held onto my arms, whispering, "Breathe, just breathe." But all I could think about was the absurdity of it all. I had spent years being silent to protect this family's image. And the one time I defended myself, I was painted as the problem. On the ride home, the scolding didn't stop. My mom stared out the window, muttering, "We raised you better than this." Dad shook his head, repeating like a mantra, "You let your feelings get the best of you. Unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable." I wanted to scream that they'd never once asked me how I felt, only how I could make things easier. Instead, I stayed silent, tasting the metallic bitterness of regret and rage tangled together. Ask yourself, if the people who should protect you choose their reputation over your dignity, how long before you stop protecting them? That night, lying in my room, I replayed everything, the accusation, the reveal, the slap. A part of me wondered if I'd lost control, if I had really become the psychotic daughter my parents feared. But another part whispered, maybe I had finally become honest. The days after the party felt like living in a crime scene where the chalk outlines were still fresh. My phone buzzed, nonstop friends, checking in distant relatives fishing for gossip, and even strangers who had somehow caught wind of the drama. The story had legs spreading faster than I could contain it. But inside my parents' house, the silence was suffocating. My mom avoided my eyes, moving through the kitchen like a ghost. My dad retreated into work, slamming doors as he left early and returning late as if sheer distance could erase what happened. The only conversations they had with me revolved around their embarrassment. "We can't even show our faces at church," my mom whispered one night, wringing her hands. "Do you understand what you've done to this family's name? What I had done?" As if Gina hadn't lit the match and Michael hadn't poured gasoline. I was the explosion so naturally I bore the blame. Gina, on the other hand, doubled down on her narrative. She told anyone who would listen that I was jealous, violent, and unstable. The slap became her shield, her way to deflect from the affair and the baby that wasn't Michael's. She's always been like this. She sobbed to one of our aunts on the phone loud enough for me to hear. She hates me because people pay attention to me. Michael cut contact with her, entirely moving out and filing paperwork I didn't dare ask about. But even he didn't defend me publicly. His truth had already been spoken, and now he slipped into silence, leaving me alone in the aftermath. The strangest part was my parents' logic. They acknowledged Gina had been wrong privately. They even admitted her lies about me were cruel. But in their eyes, I had escalated it. Words can be forgotten, Dad lectured, but violence leaves scars. I wanted to ask him if the scars on my reputation counted. If the years of swallowing my anger, of being shoved into the background while Gina danced center stage, left any scars he could see. But I didn't, because I already knew his answer. One night, I overheard them talking when they thought I was asleep. My mom's voice was low but sharp. She's turning into a problem. If she keeps lashing out, no man will want her. She'll ruin her own life. And Dad sighed, almost defeated. Maybe we should keep her and Gina apart from now on. It's safer that way. Not once did either of them say, maybe we should stand up for her. Maybe she deserves better. That was the moment I realized the fracture wasn't just between Gina and me. It ran straight through the foundation of our family, and no one was rushing to repair it. It finally reached a point where I couldn't stay quiet anymore. My parents wanted me to swallow everything like I always had, but the pressure was unbearable. One evening, as we sat down to dinner, the silence felt like a noose around my neck. The clinking of silverware was the only sound until I slammed my fork down hard enough to make both of them jump. Why aren't you angry at her? I demanded, my voice trembling. She lied about me in front of everyone. She tried to destroy me. And you both of you are acting like the worst thing that happened was me finally snapping. My dad rubbed his temples. Because you did snap. You lost control and people saw it. Do you know what kind of damage that does? I laughed bitterly. Damage. She accused me of hitting on her husband while she was pregnant. That's not just a little drama, that's character assassination. And you care more about how I embarrassed you than about how she humiliated me. My mom finally looked up, her eyes sharp. We raised you better than to resort to violence. Gina was wrong. Yes, but you hitting her gave her exactly what she wanted, a chance to play the victim. The hypocrisy burned. She's been playing the victim her whole life. And you've let her. You fed it, encouraged it. I've been biting my tongue for years while she stole the spotlight, trashed my name, and made me the villain. And you expect me to just keep taking it? They both fell silent. For once, they had no rehearsed defense. The silence stretched until I said the words I'd been holding back for years. You're complicit. By letting her treat me this way, by prioritizing your reputation over my well-being, you've both betrayed me. My mom's face twisted, torn between guilt and pride. My dad tried to speak, but his voice cracked. We thought we were keeping the peace? Peace, I spat. There's no peace in pretending. There's just rot under the floorboards, and you've been painting over the cracks. I got up from the table, my hand shaking, my throat raw. As I walked away, my mom whispered almost too quietly to catch family survive by sacrifice. I stopped at the doorway. Maybe. But I'm done being the only sacrifice in this family. That night, lying in my childhood bed, I wondered if I had finally burned the last bridge. Or if maybe for once, I'd finally forced them to see the fire that had been eating me alive. The weeks that followed were heavy with silence. I didn't hear from Gina, and honestly, that was a relief. But the quiet between me and my parents wasn't peace. It was a wall. They called once or twice, always circling the subject, always trying to pretend things were normal. But the tension hung between every word. Then one evening, I got a call I hadn't expected. It was my mom. Her voice was smaller than usual, brittle. Your sister called us, she said. She doesn't have anywhere to go. For a moment, I didn't even know how to respond. What do you mean, nowhere to go? She has a husband and a baby. My mom hesitated. Not anymore. Michael kicked her out. He's keeping the baby at least for now until she sorts herself out. The words sat in my stomach like ice. Michael had finally reached his breaking point. She wants to stay here. My mom continued, her tone cautious. But we don't know what to do. After what she pulled at your party, after everything, letting her back into this house feels wrong. But she's our daughter. And there's the baby to think of. We wanted to ask what you thought. I almost laughed. For once, they were asking me. For once, I wasn't just an afterthought. I could have said no. I could have told them to shut the door in her face to let her deal with the consequences of her lies and betrayal. A petty part of me wanted to. But another part, the part that still believed in decency, the part that thought about the innocent baby, couldn't. If she has nowhere else to go, let her stay, I said quietly. But don't fool yourselves into thinking this fixes anything. She won't change overnight. If anything, she'll dig deeper into her victim act. There was a pause. Then my mom exhaled almost like a sob. I knew you'd say that. You've always been the stronger one. Her words should have comforted me. Instead, they made me ache. Stronger, yes. But at what cost? When Gina moved back into my parents' house, the shift in dynamics was immediate. She was bitter, defensive, walking on eggshells until she wasn't. She muttered under her breath when I visited, rolled her eyes when our parents praised me, and acted like her presence was some kind of favor to us all. But the power she once held had cracked. My parents no longer let her slide with her usual behavior. When she made snide comments, they snapped back. When she sulked, they ignored it. For the first time in years, I watched them put boundaries around her. And still the unease lingered. Because Gina was like a storm, you never knew when she'd blow through and destroy everything again. If there was one innocent thread tangled in this entire mess, it was the baby. Michael had agreed to keep him temporarily, but once Gina moved back into our parents' house, so did her son. And suddenly the entire household revolved around a child who didn't ask for any of this. The first time I saw him after everything blew up, he was lying in his crib in my parents' living room. He looked up at me with big, unblinking eyes. For a moment, I felt something shift inside me, anger melting into something softer, more complicated. "He's beautiful," I whispered more to myself than to anyone else. Gina smirked from the couch, rocking one leg impatiently. "Of course he is. He's mine." The arrogance in her tone snapped me back. But I kept my focus on the baby, because really, wasn't he the only one worth protecting now? My parents were torn. They adored their grandson, showered him with the kind of unconditional love they had always spread between us. But I could see the exhaustion on their faces, the late nights, the crying fits, the constant demands. Gina wasn't stepping up. She'd hand the baby over whenever she felt overwhelmed, disappear into her room, and emerge hours later like she had no responsibilities. One night after dinner, I overheard my parents arguing in the kitchen. "She's treating this house like a free ride," my father hissed. "We're raising her child while she sulks. She needs time," my mother replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "She's lost everything." I stepped into the doorway. "No, she hasn't lost everything. She still has you. She still has me, even though she doesn't deserve it. And that's more than most people get after they burn every bridge." They looked at me tired and worn, and for once they didn't argue. Weeks passed, and I noticed something: the baby clung to me more than to Gina. He'd smile when I walked into the room, reach for me when he was fussy. Once, while I held him, Gina muttered, "Don't get too attached. He's not yours." Her words were meant to wound, but they only revealed the truth. She was jealous even of her own child's affection. I asked myself every night, was I enabling her by helping with the baby, or was I protecting him from the chaos that surrounded his mother? The line blurred until I couldn't tell anymore. And in that fog of doubt, one thing became painfully clear. Gina's downfall wasn't just hers anymore. It was bleeding into the next generation. It didn't take long for Gina's resentment to turn venomous. The more she saw me bonding with the baby, the more cutting her remarks became. One evening, as I was rocking him to sleep in the guest room, she barged in. "Do you enjoy playing mommy?" she sneered. "Because newsflash, you'll never be." I didn't even raise my voice. "Then step up and be one Gina. He deserves better than this half-hearted act you're putting on." Her face twisted. For a moment, I thought she'd slap me. But instead, she spun on her heel and slammed the door so hard the baby woke up screaming. My parents rushed in, trying to calm the chaos, but I could see the guilt flicker across their faces. They knew I wasn't wrong. A week later, Michael stopped by to drop off some baby supplies. I expected it to be a cold transactional visit, but as soon as he saw me holding the baby, he froze. His voice dropped to a whisper. "He looks happier with you than I've ever seen with her," Gina overheard. The explosion that followed was volcanic. She accused Michael of conspiring with me to steal her child. She hurled insults at me, at him, at our parents, anyone who dared to stand in the way of her crumbling pride. It was then that my parents drew the line. For the first time in my life, I watched them stand firm against her tantrum. "You're living here because your sister wanted you to," my father snapped. "Don't forget that. And if you keep disrespecting her, you won't be living here at all." The room went silent. Gina's jaw dropped, but she didn't dare argue. For once, her power had evaporated. Still, I couldn't shake the unease, because when people like Gina feel cornered, they don't fold, they plot. And late one night, I caught her in the kitchen phone pressed to her ear, whispering fast and angry. I only caught a fragment. "She doesn't deserve him, I'll make sure of it." Before she hung up the moment she saw me. The look in her eyes wasn't just hatred. It was a warning. Something was coming, and I could feel it like a storm building on the horizon. The storm broke at my cousin's engagement dinner. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, but with Gina in the room, nothing was safe. I was sitting at the table with the baby on my lap, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, when Gina suddenly raised her glass. Her eyes glittered, not with joy, but with malice. "I just want to say," she began loudly, "how unfair it is that some people pretend to be saints while secretly plotting to steal what doesn't belong to them." The table fell silent. Every eye turned toward us. She wasn't done. "My sister here," she jabbed a finger in my direction, "acts like she's the hero helping with my child. But let's be real. She's just waiting for me to slip up so she can swoop in and play mommy. Isn't that right?" I froze, the baby squirming in my arms. The air was thick with embarrassment and disbelief. My parents immediately jumped in, telling her to stop, but Gina's words had already landed. Whispers rippled across the table. Some relatives stared at me with sympathy, others with suspicion. It didn't matter that Gina's accusation was baseless. Her poison had already spread. I stood up slowly. The baby pressed against my shoulder, my voice low but steady. "Do you hear yourself, Gina? You're so desperate to paint yourself as the victim that you'll drag your own child into your lies. This isn't about me. This is about you not wanting to face the truth that you broke your own life, and now you're too proud to admit it." For once, there was no laughter, no snarky comeback from her. She just stared, trembling with fury, as the weight of the room turned against her. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, my parents pulled me aside. My mother's face was pale, her hands shaking. "She's unraveling," she whispered. And I don't know how much longer we can control her. I thought about the phone call I'd overheard, the way she looked at me like I was the enemy. The truth settled heavy in my chest. Gina wasn't just lashing out, she was planning something. And if I didn't stay vigilant, I might lose more than my dignity. The fallout from that dinner spread quickly. Within days, whispers circled through the family grapevine. Some relatives called to check on me, their voices careful, full of pity. Others didn't bother hiding their skepticism. "You've always been the responsible one aunt said. But Gina sounded so desperate. "Are you sure you're not pushing her too hard?" That was the thing about Gina, she knew how to weaponize desperation. Soon, she went further. She started contacting family friends, neighbors, even Michael's relatives. She told them I was trying to replace her as a mother, that I was manipulative, power-hungry, and jealous. She framed herself as a single mom, being bullied by her more successful younger sister.
One afternoon, a neighbor I barely knew stopped me on the street. "I heard you're fighting for custody of your sister's baby," she said cautiously. I nearly dropped my groceries. "What? That's not true." But even as I said it, I knew denial wasn't enough.
Rumors stick, no matter how flimsy. That night, I confronted Gina in front of our parents. "Why are you spreading lies?" I demanded. She smirked, arms crossed. "If people believe you more than me, then you've got nothing to worry about, right?" It was infuriating. She wasn't just playing the victim. She was baiting me, daring me to explode so she could point and say, "See, she's unhinged." My parents tried to mediate, but it was like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Gina thrived on chaos, and the more attention she got, the stronger she became. I started keeping notes, dates, times, what she said, who she told. Not because I wanted to fight her, but because deep down, I knew I might need proof. The baby, though, was my anchor. Every time she spun her lies, I looked at his wide, trusting eyes and reminded myself why I couldn't stoop to her level. He deserved stability. He deserved at least one adult in his life who wasn't drowning in pettiness and deceit. But as the lies spread, I couldn't ignore the growing dread if Gina was willing to turn the family against me. What else was she capable of? It happened on a rainy Sunday. We'd all been invited to a family brunch at my parents' house. I almost didn't go, but something in me knew avoiding Gina forever would only hand her more power. The tension was already thick when I arrived. Gina sat at the table, chin high, eyes sharp, like a queen waiting to preside over her trial. The baby was in a high chair next to her, cheeks flushed, banging a spoon against the tray. Halfway through the meal, Gina cleared her throat. "I think it's time we all acknowledge the truth," she announced. "My sister has been trying to take my son away from me. She even keeps records on me, like she's building a case." My fork froze midway to my mouth. My parents turned pale. Some relatives gasped. I set my fork down carefully, forcing my voice to stay calm. "You mean the notes I started after you began telling people I wanted custody? The lies you've been spreading?" Her face flushed crimson. "See? She admits it. She's obsessed. She wants to make me look unfit so she can swoop in and be the hero." The room erupted. Some relatives sided with me, pointing out how much I'd done for the baby, how Gina was never around when he cried. Others looked uncomfortable, unwilling to choose. Finally, my father slammed his hand against the table. The sound silenced everyone. "Enough," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "Gina, we've watched you tear this family apart piece by piece. You lied at your sister's graduation. You humiliated us in public. You betrayed your husband. And now you're dragging your child into your games." For once, Gina didn't have a comeback. Her eyes darted around the table, searching for an ally, but no one spoke. My mother leaned forward, her voice softer but sharper than I'd ever heard. "If you can't take responsibility for your life, then at least stop poisoning everyone else's. You're staying here under our roof because of your sister's compassion, not because you deserve it." The silence that followed was deafening. Gina's face crumbled. She pushed back from the table and stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the baby started crying. I scooped him up, rocking him gently while everyone sat frozen. And in that moment, I realized something Gina might never change. But the rest of us could. We didn't have to keep letting her hold us hostage. The house felt different after that brunch. Quieter, heavier, as if everyone was finally seeing Gina without the illusion she'd built around herself. She kept to her room for days afterward, sulking, barely emerging except to feed the baby. The rest of us tiptoed around the silence, waiting for her next move. But when it came, it wasn't fireworks, it was resignation. One evening, I came by to visit my parents. Gina was at the kitchen table, hair unkempt, eyes hollow. She didn't look at me, but her voice cracked as she muttered, "I can't do this anymore." For the first time, there was no venom, no mockery. Just defeat. Our parents arranged for her to meet with a counselor, and surprisingly, she agreed. Maybe she was too tired to fight, or maybe she finally realized her old tactics weren't working. Michael filed for custody soon after, and though the courts gave shared arrangements, the reality was clear. Our parents and I were the stable anchors, not Gina. As for me, I stopped trying to make sense of her chaos. Instead, I focused on the baby, on being the presence he could rely on. He was too young to remember the shouting, the slammed doors, the betrayal that cracked our family in half. But maybe that was a gift. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear Gina's voice in my head, sharp, accusing, dripping with jealousy. And I wonder, was she always destined to be this way? Or did we all play a part in breaking her? But then I remind myself of the bigger truth. I survived her games. I survived the years of suppression, the humiliation, the lies. And somehow, I came out of it. Not hardened, but stronger. Ask yourself, What would you have done if your own sister tried to ruin your future, then turned the whole family into her battlefield? Would you have snapped earlier, or would you have waited like me until the breaking point tore the mask away? The story doesn't end neatly. Gina is still part of my life, whether I like it or not. But now the power she once had over me is gone. She can't take away what I've built inside: my resilience, my self-respect, and the knowledge that I finally stood up for myself after years of silence. And maybe that's the cruelest twist of all for her. The more she tried to destroy me, the more she forced me to become unbreakable. Thanks for watching to the end. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more true drama like this, hit subscribe and like to support the channel.